So I've asked for the director of the First West Counseling Center, Todd Sherwin,
Hey.
to come and help cover this topic. Todd is a licensed professional counselor and a licensed counselor in marriage and family therapy and has been in practice for over 20 years. So Todd, thanks for coming out and making time to do this with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So are you ready to talk about healthy marriages?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So what are the essential parts of a healthy marriage?
Well, I think there's maybe a lot of parts there, but if I had to go with just like three, I'm going to go with commitment.
Okay. Commitment.
And love and value.
Okay.
I would say those are the same kind of.
Okay.
And communication.
That communication, where we hear that all the time. Such a good one.
So those three, I don't know, somebody else might have a fourth or a fifth that were just as good, but I'm going to go with those.
All right. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of those as we have this conversation. But what does a Christ-centered marriage, since this is a Christian counseling center that you're from, and we're all Christians here. What does a Christ-centered marriage look like compared to a healthy secular marriage?
Well, so a secular marriage may include godly attributes like love, patience, forgiveness, but it would lack the dimension where those things come from. And it would lack the commitment to God, which back to commitment, what we just talked about. Like I think commitment's like the glue that holds things together. I mean, that's what makes a marriage relationship different than just a loving relationship where two people really are fond about each other or even committed on some level. Like to be committed in a marriage relationship, I mean, you've decided that out of all the people on the planet, there's nobody else for you, that everybody else is off the table. The one source and recipient of your romantic, affections is this one person, as long as you both shall live. And you committed to them, but you also committed to God. And so I think like that's big. When you believe that there's a God that made you and loves you and has a plan for you, and you make this commitment to love this other creation of theirs and promise to love them as long as you both shall live. That's big. And so I think, that secular relationship might also lack the purpose, like that God has a purpose for our lives, has a mission for us to live out together, and certainly power. Like I'm a believer, so I believe that there's a God that made us and loves us, and I don't think that prayer is a wish. And so when we invite God into our home, into our lives, into our marriages, he can act. So I remind people all the time that sometimes we limit his ability. Like
I think a lot of times we do that. Yeah.
I mean, I can pray and ask God to bless me with good health, but if all I do is eat potato chips and watch TV, he can't work with that. But if I'll apply these godly attributes and principles to my marriage and the way that I love and serve my family and pray that he will help us thrive and protect us, he will.
Yeah.
So
I like how you talk about commitment. That's great. But you also mentioned like a commitment to God as well. Like, why does making that commitment to God in your marriage even extra special?
Well, it adds another dimension to the commitment that you've made. I mean, I think the one piece of commitment we've left out there that happens at most most weddings anyway, the ones that I've been to, is that you make this commitment to the person that, you're marrying, your spouse to be. You make a commitment to the God that made them, like God made this person, you didn't. You signed up to love them for the rest of your life, for better, worse, sickness and health, and whatever else you said or agreed to. And also the onlookers, like their mom and dad, their best friend, your friends,
in front of all these people.
Right. And so it's that dimension that, there's a perfect God that made us and loves us and has a plan. And when we commit to God, I will love, serve, be with for the rest of as long as we both shall live, this other person that you have made, and faults, flaws, and all. Long about year 3, your partner did something that really hurt your feelings, and you're not feeling all lovey-dovey and so, strong about that promise you made to them. But hey, God's still God. And so you made that commitment to him. And so commitment is something that we can lean on in our relationships to see us through the tough times. And having that commitment to God, there's just a whole nother dimension to your commitment.
Yeah, or at least an anchor, or to give like a pause to like before you just kind of throw it all in. Because, Caleb and I, we did seek counseling for a minute there. And I know for myself, for sure, just knowing that, I didn't make just that commitment in front of 300 people. I mean, I did do that, but I committed more importantly to God that I was going to love Caleb. And make it work. That was my commitment. That was really a strong conviction for myself. Is like, I told God, I promised God in front of 300 people that I was going to see it through. So maybe I should try and pause and figure it out how we're going to do it.
It's a big deal. Those weren't
really
just
was.
words to you.
No, it wasn't. Yeah. So I agree with all of that for sure. So what are some things that a married couple can do to ensure they stay on a good path?
Okay. Well, I'm going to tie this into commitment real quick. And I got this from a book that I read that Dr. Scott Stanley wrote on commitment. But there's two parts to commitment, at least two parts. But he talks about two parts of commitment. There's the dedication, which is the good part. The feel-good part, the part that got you committed in the first place.
Yeah.
Because, you love this person and you're for this cause, or you believe in this thing. Or when it's this person, the air tastes better when you're around them. And, it's what got you all committed in the first place was this, the dedication side of commitment that you're passionate about, or the thing that got you committed to run a marathon or support this cause because you believe in it. But with any commitment comes constraints as well. And he would describe the constraints as the things that would be considered cost if the present course were abandoned. And there are those things with every commitment we make. And marriage is no exception. And so when you're married, if you were to abandon that commitment and abandon that course that you set, there's cost to it.
Yeah.
It's painful to a lot of people involved. It's expensive. And there's just a lot of fallout from it. And so maybe there's some people that, hey, they've stayed married, which I don't really like that phrase. Like, a rock can stay put. It takes no effort. And marriage does. To leave your father and mother and cleave to your spouse, it takes effort. And so
that's a good point.
And so, but there are people that have stayed because of the
constraints were too high.
Yeah. The present, the cost if the present course were abandoned. And so, they remain because of the kids, or they remain because of the family, but they're miserable together. And I don't, somebody's missed the point there. But anyway, the dedication, like that's important to nurture that, remind yourself why you got in this in the first place and how special this person is and how valuable they are to you. And nurturing the dedication of your relationship's important. And so, we'll just take the, typical American couple that, let's say they're married, they've been married 8 or 10 years, they might have a kid or 2 or 2.5, whatever the norm is. And, nowadays, often that means, both of them have jobs and the kids are in school and the grass needs mowing and the clothes need to be washed and the kids need help with their homework and the groceries aren't going to buy themselves and they're not going to cook themselves. And there's just, there's a lot of things. And, the way I made that sound didn't sound like a whole lot of fun. And sometimes it's not, even though that can be rewarding. But it's just a lot of have-tos, a lot of obligations, and some of that stuff is stressful. And so if that's what defines the relationship is a bunch of have-tos and obligations and stressful things, when his or her name comes up on your phone to call you, that's stressful.
Oh, no, not again. Like, what are they calling for?
Yeah, I was good friends with a guy that did my taxes for years. And so, we were friends. Like we go eat together and, saw each other outside of like taxes and stuff. But I guess this time of year that defined our relationship. And so when my phone rang and my friend's name was
like,
there,
oh no,
my heart would speed up. My blood pressure would probably change, because that defined our relationship, at least this time of year. And so nurturing the dedication of your commitment, the thing that, you're passionate about together, the things that just set aside things for you to enjoy together. And I like I like the 3Ds. I think they referred to as like 3Ds of healthy marriage. And I may have this wrong, but I believe the first time I ever heard that was from a couple, Steve and Debbie Wilson. That may be Dr. Steve and I don't know. They did a marriage conference at a church that I was at. Gosh, it may have been 2 decades ago. And they talked about these 3Ds of a healthy marriage.
Yeah.
And they're easy to remember. They've just stuck. But it's dialogue daily, date weekly, and depart monthly. And I may explain this differently than they do, but that's important stuff. Like to be intentional about communicating about things that matter, not just what you did at work and who you saw at lunch, that kind of stuff. But things that matter to you, what you're struggling with, what you read in the proverb this morning, or how God spoke to you, or something that reminded you of them, or something the kids did, or something you're looking forward to, or something you're dreading, or how they could pray for you, those kind of things. Like also, I guess, to keep up on the business of the house, if there's matters that need to be addressed. But so if you dialogue daily, which, I don't know what it is. My wife and I, when we talked about this years ago, when I first heard it, I was like, well, we ought to do that. And, she was on board for that too. She might have been more excited about it than I was. and so we went from dialoguing, I don't know, about things that really mattered 3 times a week to 4.5 times a week. I don't know, but we were more intentional about it. And for sure, the second one, the date weekly, and that, I don't know, that's maybe the biggie for me. And I don't know, but if you don't dialogue daily, then they have these rules. I remember this too, that you weren't to talk about work, kids, or problems.
Yeah, has to be fun stuff.
Well, and apparently people would ask them, like, what is there to talk about? And they would say, well, we'll go and find out, something like that. But there's other things to talk about than work, problems, or kids. But I would say this: if you don't dialogue daily and you finally get a date, you're going to wind up having to talk about work, problems, or kids.
Yeah.
So, and so a date, now somebody may have a better definition, and I may have got this somewhere, but I think I made it up years ago, that my definition of a date was time set aside to enjoy each other or something together. Like it was time set aside, like it was intentional.
Yeah.
It wasn't plans got rained out, or I got some leftover time, or it turns out I'm not going fishing this weekend. So, you made it a priority. You set that time aside, and it was just to go enjoy something or each other. And by that definition, if you've got little kids and you're on a budget, you don't even have to leave the house to do that.
A lot of times Caleb and I, we watch TV together, but it's definitely, it's a togetherness thing. It's not just like his show or my show, and you have to watch it together, and because it's one of the things we like to talk about.
Yeah.
When we thought about it and whatever, and our own little quirkiness of what we like to watch,
Yeah, something you look forward to.
Yeah. That's one of our little things. And I just know for us, like the dialogue daily, I like to ask different questions, like, well, what are your dreams? Which is not always a favorite for men, but just because I dream about stuff. So like, what are your dreams? What are your goals? So sometimes I get responses, sometimes I don't, but it's still a fun question to ask, I think. Yeah. So good conversation, or maybe you just watch a show, but time set aside to enjoy each other or something together. And you ought to do that every week. And so, and if you're really intentional about it, then hopefully that's 3.5 times a month or so. But that's good stuff. And the monthly depart monthly, I don't know. I think when I first heard that, I thought, man, that's a lot of getaways. I don't know if my budget has vacation time for all that.
It wasn't that. It was, I think more, and I may be explaining this differently, but I'll say it this way anyway. If your idea date is the same restaurant, and you sit in the same place and you order the same thing every Friday night, at least once a month, try something else. If it's dinner and a movie in West Monroe, try Shreveport. I can remember when my wife and I, we didn't live as far from there as we did now. But we used to sometimes go on a date in El Dorado, in Arkansas. I mean, we left the state. It was, yeah. And so anyway, it felt like somewhat of a getaway. And that turns out that's good for us.
So what are the top 3 toxic behaviors or attitudes in a marriage that you've seen?
Well, that kind of reminds me of the essential parts. I just had to pick, 3, because you gave me the number 3.
I mean, if you have a longer list, you can give me a longer list or shorter list. It doesn't have to be 3.
Yeah, so, I remember, I think James Dobson had these 10 or 12 marriage killers. And of course, so he was an expert and he had come up with those things. And I don't claim to be, and I hadn't done the research, but just off the top of my head, I am going to go with overcommitment being one of them.
Okay.
And nowadays, I think I can make a good argument for that between work and kids and hobbies or friends or golly, even church, that we can be so busy and our schedules can be so crowded. And some of those things.
So you mean overcommit to other things, not to your spouse?
Yeah.
Okay.
Overcommitted to things that are just naturally going to make themselves priorities.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good things, especially like if you have kids, for your kids to be involved in. There's enough good things for your kids to be involved in our community, to use up 36 hours a day, 9 days a week. And so we have to help our kids say no, but we also have to say no, whether it's the extra job, for the extra income, for the bigger house or the nicer car or the camp we're sending kids to or the vacation we want to go on. So we make, sacrifices, and you can't really sacrifice sleep, not for too long. You can't sacrifice fixing dinner or taking the kids to the school or, whatever it is. And so if you're not careful, you sacrifice that time that you would have spent talking about stuff that matters or going on that date this weekend. And overcommitment, you got 1 or 2 exhausted people that, dedication's not just running real high.
Yeah.
So that to me, I think that's a big one. It
sounds like you're just taking your spouse for granted.
Yeah.
They're going to be there, so I can still do whatever I need to do.
Yeah. And so, the idea like, well, the kids got to come first or, not really. And so if you're not careful though, the kids do come first and their grades come first and their extracurriculars come first. And then, good things like something you're a part of in the community or some service project or even extra stuff at church, taking care of yourself. And, anyway, it can become a lot. And the quality time to spend with each other gets crowded off the calendar.
Yeah, not much left. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what are some other things? I think you have a few others.
So I'd have to go with addictions, just because I've seen that a lot. Like they destroyed people and relationships.
Yeah.
And so that's a big one. Now I know, like, maybe if you were, interviewing someone like Dave Ramsey or something, they would put finances on that list, and maybe that should make the top 3. I don't know. Certainly, it'd make the top 10.
Yeah.
And I don't know what else would be on the top 10. If it was, infidelity or, in-laws or who knows. Well, we're talking about behaviors, but there was a guy named Gary Smalley, died a few years back, but I think Gary Smalley, well, I know because I've read it, it's in black and white, that he would say that unresolved anger was the number 1 destroyer of relationships. And so, so I would say this, that the overcommitment, the addictions, the finances, whatever it is, whoever is for that, like if they were to say that's the number 1 destroyer of relationships, they could all be right and Gary Smalley be right too, because it's the resentment.
Yeah,
over the finances, or you don't have time for me, or whatever it is. It's the unresolved that like builds the wall that blocks our ability to give and receive love. If I'm mad at you, I don't want to do anything nice for you, and I don't want you to do anything nice for me. And if you do, you're not getting any credit for it. And anyway, the wall is being built. So yeah, I would say unforgiveness, unresolved anger would have to make that list too.
So what have you found to be the biggest game changer in marriages as you counseled? Like what's helped turn them around?
Well, I'm going to go with something I encountered, I don't know how many years ago now, but this guy named Dr. Bob Burby, and he had this posture of personal responsibility, and I just thought he was right on with it. And so, biggest game changer. Well, I'd say this: marriage is not about choosing the right person, but about being the right person. I think always. Now,
Yeah.
Let me throw out somewhat of a disclaimer there. Like, healthy relationship takes two people, and so if you're talking about someone that's I don't know, an unrepentant, abusive or cheating person, or what we could come up with a lot of, or just incapable of having a healthy relationship for some, or
reason. Unwilling,
or they're not committed, they're not in it, then they're going to struggle.
Yeah,
sure, any relationship's going to struggle, but and so I'm not saying that no matter who you've married, it's up to you, but the posture of personal responsibility, I really like. And so he had these statements, and one of them was, I'm responsible for my thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and behavior. And I don't know, we could spend an hour, maybe I'm not smart enough to talk about that for an hour, but we could talk for a while on why that statement is true.
Yeah.
I'm responsible for my thoughts. Well, I believe it was Martin Luther, the church reformer, who gets credit for saying you can't keep birds from flying over your head, but you can keep them from building a nest in your hair. And so, I'm responsible. The thoughts that I keep or entertain, that was up to me. And we could surely make a scientific argument that our thoughts, dictate our emotions. Sometimes we get that backwards.
Yeah.
And we think what we feel, but our feelings, our emotions will get in line with what we think.
Yeah.
Beliefs, you're not going to get any pushback there. I want to be able to, I don't want somebody telling me what I can and can't be for, or, what I believe or what I can't believe, or anyway. So I'm responsible for what I believe, and my actions as an adult, nobody made me do it. As crude as it may sound, somebody could put a gun to my head. I still have a choice. So, I'm responsible for my thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and behavior. And so Dr. Bob, he would point out that if that statement's true, the second one has to be true. That I'm not responsible for your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and behavior. And as obvious and as simple as that is, I think it's pretty profound.
Yeah.
But there's a line where we end and others begin, no matter what the relationship.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that is pretty profound. I think we could go into like having with all of relationships, really, like you're saying, like your family and friends and coworkers and everybody, like just in who you encounter and stuff, not owning what they're doing or saying to you or whatnot, and just do what you know you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I like to say, and somebody I'm sure said this before me, and I got it from somewhere, but I'm responsible for myself and to other people. And I'm responsible to all other people. I mean, I'm responsible to the guy I just met on the street, or the guy that I just passed by that might need help. But now I'm greatly responsible to some people in my life. If you're a close friend of mine, or you're part of my family, or you're one of my kids, I'm greatly responsible to you. And to my wife, I'm greatly responsible to her, but I'm responsible for myself.
Yeah.
And so there's a line where we end and others begin. And so it's kind of an uncomfortable place to be on the receiving end of someone not recognizing that line exists, and they come barging in telling you what you are or aren't going to do or can't think or feel. And so anyway, that's uncomfortable to have someone cross that your personal property line or your boundary.
Yeah, your boundary, yeah.
To make choices that you would want to make, or for instead of allowing you to think for yourself or choose for yourself. But equally as troublesome is when people cross that line going the other way, and I'm trying to control something that I actually can't control, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm doing something about something I can't do something about. And so there's a line where I end and others begin. And so anyway, he arrives at, in his teaching, this question. He said that we often ask the wrong question, like, how do I want people in my life and my circumstances to be? Well, I don't get to pick all that.
Yeah.
I certainly don't get to decide how other people are always going to be. And while I might have something to say about my circumstances, I live in an environment that is beyond my control in many ways. And so, but that's often the question that we ask is, how do I wish things were, or how do I wish she would be, or how do I wish he would change? And the better question to ask is, given the circumstances that I'm in, who do I want to be? As far as I know, that's completely within my reach.
Yeah. I have to say, like I said before, like Cape and I did go have counseling, and there's a few times I had a few like imaginary Todd conversations. But really what changed for me in my heart is because I started thinking, well, what am I doing? What can I do? And the number one question is like, well, am I praying for my husband? And when I answered that truthfully, which was no in the moment, stopped the argument for me. But it really did. Because I was like, am I being the Christian wife that I'm supposed to be? Am I praying for my husband? No. Well, then, no, you're not being the wife you're supposed to. And that was kind of along with what you're talking about. Like, what's in my control?
Right. There were things that were within your reach.
that I could do, that I was not doing. And also just appreciate, like what you said earlier, like, just, you talked about the power of having God in our marriages. And that's one of them I just wasn't tapping into. And really a lot of that kind of cooled a lot of any anger I would have had. It just being rerouted back to that. Am I putting that lens and that focus just cooled a lot of resentment that I would have had or did have. So that's, I'm kind of seconding, like, yes, I agree with what the things you're saying for sure. Because
now there was a third statement, like and it wasn't a disclaimer, but kind of in relationships, we influence each other's thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and behavior. But that's not the same thing as determine or control. I kind of think of that as like those three statements or this posture of personal responsibility. It's kind of like the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Like, there's a lot of wisdom in that about the relationship. Like what can I do something about? What can I? And I know there's a longer version that's better than that one, but that kind of sums up.
Yeah, that's a pretty good, say that on tattoos here and there. So,
Yeah. So, and now don't get me wrong, that just helps us kind of hold a mirror up in front of ourselves and reminds us what we can do something about. But don't get me wrong, that's not like a excuse to disengage. Yeah. Like I've joked about with it, like if I came home tonight and my wife is balled up on the couch crying, and I know this personal responsibility, it's not for me to walk through and say, well,
that's her problem.
That's her deal. No, it's not for me to not care or disengage. Yeah. But to realize, hey, I only go so far, but I want to do my part well. And so as believers, that posture of personal responsibility when we're in a difficult circumstance or maybe in conflict with the person that we're married to, God, who would you have me be here? Given the circumstances that I'm in, the person that I would admire, respect in my shoes does what? And hey, the person that you could bless or refer back to, I want him to be able to work.
Do you think a marriage is ever too far gone?
I want to answer that in, I guess, 3 parts.
Okay.
I'm going to say no. And I'm going to point out a couple of practical examples. One, I have a friend who's on his 3rd marriage. Okay. 2nd wife. He got married. They got divorced. Married to other people, divorced again, and then he remarried his first wife. And that was literally like 35, 40 years ago. And I've counseled people like that. So, well, you would think like that one's too far gone. They've already hired lawyers. They've said horrible things about each other in court. They've fought it out over financial stuff.
Like, and the messiness of that.
Families probably picked sides, and somehow here they are together. And so I'm not saying that's God's plan for marriage, but he's even worked that out. And so when it seems too far gone, sometimes it's not. And so another way of answering that question, or another point I want to make here, is I'm going to use the story of Lazarus in the Bible. If you remember, Lazarus was sick. They sent word inviting Jesus to come. Yeah. And by the time Jesus and his disciples get there, it was just way too late. They had missed the funeral. all there was a corpse that was rotting. There was the affirmation that if you would have just been here, Lazarus would still be alive. But when he showed up, all hope had already fled the scene. And so I would just say that if a couple would invite Jesus into their circumstances, they might see the same thing happen because, and I've seen God do kind of, miraculous things, really change hearts and soften people towards each other. And maybe they had, to quote from another Bible story, a come to their senses moment.
Yeah.
I think I will go home and do things my Father's way now. Like I've made a mess of things here on my own. And so that's the second. So I would just point to that there's stories in the Bible where it seems like it's too far gone and it's not. And I could point to examples, living examples of people that we would have all agreed that's too far gone.
Yeah.
Whether that's marriage or whether that was their addiction or whatever it is. And, God's the hero in their story now.
Yeah.
But then thirdly, I just want to point out that marriage takes two. And so there are times where you have someone who's just completely unwilling, unrepentant, or, and so I'm going to stick with no, though.
Yeah.
Like God can do miraculous things.
Yeah.
But, even the Bible, it recognizes there's such a thing as divorce. Because, so, and I'm
where
not
it's
one
needed.
that believes that's the unpardonable sin or anything like that. So,
right. So what are some ways to help build trust where trust has been broken? And what about respect?
Well, ways to build trust where trust has been broken. I'd say, first of all, we need full disclosure. So let's just take the unfortunately common and big one of infidelity. Full disclosure is important. To engage in the process of trying to fix things, to reconcile the relationship and mend those things. I mean, that's a big deal. It takes quite the commitment. I mean, it's hard to give your heart to someone in the first place, but when they've dropped it, to pick it up and give it back to the same person's. Yeah. That takes a lot. And so full disclosure, no, everything that happened, when this all started and how far that went or how often or, where, those kind of things, because it's not fair. It's not fair to either person there. It's not fair to the person to pick their heart up and try to give it back to the same person again and do the hard work of forgiveness. Only to later find out there was more, that's just not fair. But I would say it's maybe equally not fair. I don't know. Maybe somebody could argue that point with me, but not fair to the person who did the betraying either, because we have this need to love and be loved. And if you keep who you are a secret, you won't allow that need to ever be met.
Yeah, you can't be fully known.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if somebody can't know who you really are and how bad it was and what all went on, then maybe they can be in love with the image that you let them see, but not really you. Yeah. And we have that need to love and be loved. And in fact, I put it like this, that aside from food, shelter, and water, I think those are our big needs. Dr. William Glasser wrote it in a book years ago, that the need to love and be loved and feel worthwhile to ourselves and others. That's big stuff. And I would point out, if I could go back to the posture of personal responsibility again and kind of hit that with that need to love, that's within your reach. You don't need anybody's help. I mean, that's what, half of it? Yeah. To make someone valuable, to love them, you don't need anybody else's help there. Now, to be loved, that takes somebody else. But if you're keeping things a secret and you're trying to work things out and you didn't disclose everything, you're not allowing yourself to be loved. And so then for me, whatever the process is you're going to go through, it needs to go through or end up with forgiveness. Where the charges are dropped and we've turned the page and we start a new chapter. No, I hadn't forgotten these things, but they're not part of the chapter that we're in. I've given you my heart, fully. We're fully committed, maybe like never before. And so I think those are, full disclosure, the forgiveness. And you mentioned respect.
Yeah. What about respect? Is that the same kind of stuff or anything different?
Well, I don't know, the difference between respect and value and love. I suppose you could have a respect for someone you don't really love. But anyway, those things, they kind of run together for me.
Okay.
We could be saying the same thing. And that guy, Gary Smalley, that, said he said that unresolved anger would destroy relationship. His definition of love was to do worthwhile things for someone who's valuable to us, which most of us, I think if we were going to set out to define love, we would try to do so on an emotional level. And he left emotions out of that. Doing worthwhile things, so behavior for someone who's valuable to us. A person who's valuable to us is someone that carries weight with us, someone that we respect. And so with forgiveness and respect, you're not holding this thing over someone's head as you go forward. You've turned the page, start a new chapter.
Yeah. So. Okay. Well, are there any other tools a couple could utilize to rebuild the bridges?
The 3Ds. So once you start that new chapter, learn from the past, nurture the dedication.
Go back to the beginning, I guess, back to the basics.
And maybe there's some boundaries that are there, some things that they've learned, some rules for their relationship that they want to put in place. So maybe they're more intentional. I tell people this, you're just going to be hard pressed to find someone who accidentally had a good marriage. I think it takes intention and effort and attention.
Yeah.
I think for some people, hey, they get to a point where their marriage was broken and they're like that guy who got his inheritance from his father and he went off in the foreign land and he squandered it on loose living and he wound up feeding the pigs during the famine. And the Bible said he came to his senses. Yeah. And how did I get here? I did not mean to wind up here. Yeah. And I've made a mess of things. I will go home and make myself a slave to my father, which he misunderstood his father's love, but because he was a son as soon as he started home, I guess, or maybe the whole time he was. Yeah. But, for some couples, maybe the awful thing, in a way is a good thing. God used that as a good thing. And there's this come to their senses moment and they have a love and an intimate relationship like they never had before. So
are there some secular trends that you think couples should be wary of, or just things that are pitfalls that lead Christians away? They're maybe a newly engaged couple or something that kind of leads them away from what the marriage that Christ wants them to have.
Yeah, I think I could mention quite a few things here, but I'm going to go with Dr. Scott Stanley. I was talking about him earlier with commitment. I don't know if he coined the term, but cohabitating. He talks about that. And that's becoming more and more commonplace, I think. That people are living together that aren't married or living together before marriage or and so he has a really good talk, by the way, on sliding versus deciding and how if you're not careful, just the inertia of the relationship. Well, for instance, I can't describe it as eloquently as he does, I don't think, but it's common this happens that, hey, we've been dating a while and
here's a key to my place.
Well, yeah, but even it leads up to that. Maybe we've been sleeping together. Why not spend the night together? Why not spend the weekend together? You're over here all the time. Why not bring some of your things over here? Well, you're over here more than you're not. Why don't we just move in together and save on rent? And then it's much more likely that somebody's fixing to get pregnant after that. And then, well, it looks like we're having a baby. Why not get married? Yeah. And if that's where you're at, if you're listening to this, no, I did not judge or condemn you there, because I want to point this out, that the missing ingredient, if you're not careful there, was the commitment, the decisive moment that, this is the person that I want to spend the rest of my life with. I've just ruled out. I'm willing to rule out the other 7 billion people on the planet, or however many there are nowadays. Yeah. All of those, none of them on the table anymore. Just you, the one source and recipient of my romantic affections, as long as we both shall live. If we just why nodded our way into this, and the inertia of the relationship led us to why not get married. I don't know, maybe that'll help us on our taxes, or, maybe we can live with that since we're going to have kids. We might as well share the last, or that's socially acceptable, or for whatever reason, or somebody finally came around. So also it's, he would point out that it's harder to hit the brakes on a relationship when you realize maybe this person isn't the one for me, but you're living together, and you got a cell phone plan together,
Mm-hmm.
and you got a kid together,
Yeah.
and a dog, and anyway, there's just
Yeah.
a lot there. Whereas if you weren't that intertwined, you could say, well, you know what? I really like this person, and we've done some fun things together and learned a lot of stuff about each other, but I don't think this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. You can walk away from that.
A lot easier. Yeah.
Whereas otherwise, it looks more like a divorce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
A lot harder to move on.
Yeah. So his advice, I like this. His advice was to not do committed things in uncommitted relationships. So I would just go with that. Like secular influence, don't do that.
Yeah.
And don't do committed things. Give that part of yourself, your life, or that kind of commitment to someone that you're in an uncommitted relationship with. You're not going to later regret not doing that.
Yeah.
But you may greatly regret having done that. So
some wise words for sure. Okay, so a couple's having to go to therapy. How long should a couple stay in therapy?
Well,
like, what is their average time? Like 6 months, 3 months, a year? Like, what's?
Well, if they had a really good therapist like me.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that really doesn't depend on the therapist so much as the couple and what they've got going on. Well, until their goals are met. Like,
yeah.
Now I would say, just because you're feeling better and you had a good couple weeks doesn't mean your goals are met.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that we wanted out of this? Hopefully, when you went to counseling, you talked to your therapist about that. Like, what do you hope to get out of this? If counseling were to be successful, how would we know? And let's put that in actionable goal form when your goals are met.
Yeah.
So, not forever. And not just because you had a good couple weeks.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. For those who are like newly engaged or thinking about being engaged, how important is premarital counseling? Because, I've seen people like, my siblings, I think my brother had like 1 session. And I think my sister had like maybe 4. I mean, it's kind of like all over the place. Like, some places like require, depending on who's marrying you, to do X amount, and some don't care at all. And just so what are your thoughts on, how important is premarital counseling?
Okay, so I think you're going to like my answer here.
Okay.
Premarital counseling, I think, is more important than the wedding cake, much more. And it's less important than the level of commitment. So let me say a couple of things. One, and I'm not against weddings, but we spend a lot of time and, financial resources in a few hours, and a cake that's going to be eaten or go bad, and everything else that goes along with the day.
Yeah.
It's going to end, we'll have pictures, and that's just the beginning. And so we're overly prepared for the wedding ceremony or party that follows. I think at times it can be quite extravagant, and very unprepared for the relationship that's just started. It went to a whole new level. So premarital counseling is more important than the wedding cake. I have met people who are want to know how much their premarital counseling is going to cost. It's going to be the cheapest thing you do between now and
all the rest of it.
At least where I work, and it's a good investment. But I would say that it's less important than the level of commitment. I just come back to that. Like, commitment's the thing that holds it together. I'm not the expert on concrete, but I've been thinking about this lately, and I ran this by some people that know about concrete. But if there's essential ingredients in marriage, and we talked about 3 of them earlier, 3 or 4 of them earlier. Well, there's essential ingredients in concrete too. There's sand, and maybe you call it something else, and then there's rock, and maybe you call that aggregate, or maybe the sand is. But anyway, and then it takes water to activate the other ingredient, Portland cement. And so those are all key ingredients. You're not going to have concrete without any of them.
Yeah.
But Portland cement, maybe it's just cement. But anyway, that's the stuff that holds it all together.
Yeah, without that, you surely aren't going to have
otherwise
concrete.
You have wet sand and gravel. And I don't think you want to build on that. And so commitment is the thing. Like, yes, you want to love each other. You want to value each other. You want to communicate well. But there's going to be times when you're not going to like the person you're married to, at least momentarily. Yeah. And it's that commitment that sees you through it. It's the commitment that you can lean on. I think the level of commitment's more important than that. And so I'm pro counseling and pro premarital counseling. I think it's worthwhile. You're going to talk about, marriage expectations because y'all didn't grow up in the same house, hopefully. And so you have
hopefully.
You have different ideas about what marriage looks like. And then you're two different people. And although you've been dating for a while and you think you know each other well, you don't. And you may be good at having relationships, but you've never been married.
Yeah.
And you've for sure not been married to this person. And so there's stuff that you need to learn about yourself and each other.
Yeah.
How to resolve conflict, healthy ways to communicate, those kind of things. But, and the research shows that couples that participate in premarital counseling are more likely to have a, fulfilling, lasting marriage. Now, let me just point out that I think the kind of couples that are going to go get prepared for their marriage before they get married, we're probably going to do better anyway. Because they're that kind of people. So, so go ahead, put yourself in that category of people.
Yeah.
And go get premarital counseling. You won't regret it. So,
yeah. I just want to say too, Caleb and I, we did 6 weeks, I think, for where the person that was marrying us and whatnot. That was kind of like the thing we needed to do or what they wanted us to do. But honestly, Caleb and I would look back and it's we could have gone longer and should have done longer. I think we would have, but at the time in our heads, it's only 6 weeks. You can only do 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And we look back on that moment, that was really naive of us to think that. I don't know why we thought that or got that in our heads, but because there was just some things that we knew ahead of time, there's some things that we need to talk more about. But we only have 6 weeks. And we laugh about that now. Why did we do that? I don't know.
Yeah.
But we did. So, yeah.
But less important than the level of commitment, the couple that has decided that as long as we both shall live, this is the one source and recipient of my romantic affections on the planet, the one person for me to love, share my deepest whatevers with, the one person who will have my back and I will have theirs. And we're going to raise a family together, and we're going to write the rest of our chapters together, no matter what, for sickness and health, better or worse, all that kind of stuff. They seem to understand what they're getting into, and that kind of commitment will see you through a lot.
Well, is there any other advice? You just give a lot of good advice right there. But any other advice for a couple that might be struggling or just on any level, any other encouragement you might give them?
Well, so the 3 Ds, and lean on your commitment and remind yourself. I think it's right, in the Bible, God would have his people remember what he had brought them through. Remember what it was that you loved about this person to start with and that kind of stuff. And I was thinking about this a while back, and it's, Wednesday is trash day at our house.
Yeah.
So the trash cans have to be out by the road. We have 2 on Wednesdays, and everybody at my house either has school to be to or jobs to get to. And so really nobody's fighting over who gets to take out the trash,
Yeah.
And we haven't just assigned it to somebody, and so I think, I don't know, over the span of a couple of months, probably everybody takes out the trash at some point. But I could just see myself, running late one day, and I got to take my son to school that morning, and I'm running behind, and if my wife were to say, hey, don't forget, you got to take the trash out. I mean, I might be like, well, I'm already running late. I mean, honestly, I'll be a minute and 17 seconds later, if that, if I took the trash out. But, can't somebody else take the trash out,
Yeah.
If I were to go back to when we were dating, or what some people might call courting, if she would have called me on a Wednesday morning and it was raining and said, Todd, I'm supposed to take my trash out this morning and it's raining. I don't know what to do. I would say, don't worry about it. You only live 20 minutes from my house. I don't mind at all. I'll drive to your house, take your trash out. I don't want you to get wet. And then it take me 5 minutes, and then I got to be back at work. 45 minutes out of my way. No, anything for you.
It. Yeah.
And so just, think back on that and learn something from it. When you were trying to win that person's heart, and you would do anything for them, and you would go to great length just to put a smile on their face, get to loving them like that again.
Yeah. Sounds like good advice. And that's something like I actually read, because I did read a few marriage books before, like we're doing our engagement time. And that's one of the things that stuck with me. I think they told me to write out at least 12. I don't know why 12 or what magic number that was. But it was helpful, I have to say, just remember like, hey, there are some good things, especially in that moment where you're like, man, I'm really over this person. I'm just so angry. Just to remind yourself of like, they are a good person. You did marry them for a reason, and just remind you of yourself of those things. And that has really been helpful for me. Yeah. Well, Todd, that sounds like really, you've given a lot of good advice. If anyone needs a good marriage counselor or just counseling in general, the First West Counseling Center is a great place to go. I've been there myself. Good place to go. I can testimony right here. But Todd, can you tell us, like, what are the hours? What are the hours there for anybody who is interested?
Our office is open pretty much 8 to 6 Monday through Thursday. And we do have a few after hours appointments available. We even have couple of counselors that can work people in on the weekend, but pretty much, 8 to 6, Monday through Thursday.
Okay. And what's the number to call there?
It's 318-322-1427, 322-1427.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Todd. Just thanks for coming out and sharing all this wisdom with us. It's a lot of good stuff. And I'm just really glad you're able to come out and have this conversation with me today.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Todd, and this is my story of the middle.
I'm your host, Brandy Bostic, and you'll be listening to Season 3 of the Up From the Muck podcast. Next week, I'll be wrapping up the series on healthy relationships with Part 2, Friends and Family. If you're interested in getting a little extra, check out my Patreon account in the show notes for ways to get merch and other cool perks.
Psalms 40, verse 2, He brought me up from the desolate pit out of the muddy clay and set my feet on the rock, making my steps secure.